We're just going through our new master storytelling toolkit, which has 6 core tools to help build powerful meta-narratives for social and environmental change. And in this toolkit, since we have one most important, is a values toolkit. So what is the values toolkit and why do we need it? Well, if you want to create long-term positive change on social and environmental issues, which I think we all do, then we need to engage the right values. This values toolkit is part of a broader training resource built around something which we call values-ception, the ability to see and work with values. This is an extremely powerful tool, which can help us to see what is happening beneath the surface of everything that we do. This toolkit brings together 2 values theories and merges them into one, making this a very powerful resource, especially if you're looking to create cultural, political and social change. The first is taken from Schwartz's values theory, which maps out the universal values that we all hold in this handy size map. This allows us to see the relationship between different values and how warming certain values in areas can actually activate similar values in the surrounding area, which is very useful. The second values theory is taken from Max Scheller's hierarchy of values, which suggests that there are different flow states between values, depending on the attention that we give to them. Working with both of these values theories gives us the necessary breadth and depth to be able to find ways of awakening the necessary values needed for positive change. Being able to spot values in their implicit state, understand how they relate to each other, and to understand their different flow states may take time to learn, but the insights this toolkit provides is so helpful and can be easily be applied in your work. For example, here are some simple takeaways where we see some classic values mistakes that are pretty much everywhere. And the first one, and so obvious, but it seems to escape our attention: you can't extrinsically motivate an intrinsic value. Think about it. Intrinsic values like protecting the environment, social justice, equality, these all sit up in the higher category, in the universalism category over here on the values map. These are intrinsic values, so that the nature is that they are self-transcendent values. Extrinsic motivation uses anxiety, fear, or pleasure to drive behaviour. When we do try to extrinsically motivate an intrinsic value, like shouting at people that they ought to care for our planet, for example, we create what's called a values dissonance. It just doesn't fit together, it doesn't feel right. And that dissonance has to come out in one form or the other, usually in conflict, in negative reactions, and mostly it's embodied in polarisation. So when we try to use extrinsic motivation by using fear tactics and creating anxiety on the climate crisis, guess what? We're creating dissonance, which leads to an interior conflict, out of which we see some toxic behaviours emerging. And that is clearly what we're seeing today, especially with the climate movement. But if we intrinsically motivate audiences towards an intrinsic value, we replace that dissonance with something else called values resonance. And in doing so, we overcome polarization, we overcome low engagement, conspiratorial thinking, which is a coping mechanism to overcome values dissonance. Another insight, which we could take from the values toolkit, is that values exist in different flow states. Depending on the attention we give to them, values can change their nature. When intrinsic values are made explicit, their nature steers towards an extrinsic flow state. It becomes restrictive guidelines and thou shalt not. For example, most businesses and companies would hold sustainability as a core value. That's good. But as soon as it becomes explicit, we have to stop doing things in order to engage with that value. We have to stop wasting and so on. So the motivation steers towards extrinsic motivation, which is very hard to maintain over time. But when values remain implicit, in other words, are communicated at the meta-narrative level, they become expansive, inviting, purpose-driven, energizing. We want to be part of something that connects us closer to that value, and so on. Another insight, and this might take a while to sink in: extrinsic values are anxiety driven. Intrinsic values are self-transcendent. They both have very different states and have to be engaged in very different ways. So what does this mean? Well, basically, it makes no sense to use anxiety to try to engage intrinsic values. Just because we might be talking about protecting the environment or any other intrinsic values that falls over here, just because we're speaking about them, does not mean that we're engaging our audiences at the values level. When we use classic marketing techniques where we create anxiety and offer the magic solution, which is the classic marketing formula, or in our case, we create eco-anxiety and offer our campaign as a magic solution, is that our use of anxiety engages the wrong values. They tend to create an engagement with our lower values of power and security. This is why we can't use marketed methodologies in our work for positive change. Every time we use anxiety, we create a natural flow state towards extrinsic values. And that's why it's so hard to create long-term behaviour and social change. That is why we need to learn how to work with intrinsic values in a way that doesn't use anxiety to drive engagement. Knowing how to do this at a meta-narrative level can open up a whole range of possibilities that can help to bring about lasting change. And these are just a few of the insights, and there are so many more to discover. If you're interested in learning about values theory and how to apply it into your work, then book yourself onto our Master Storytelling training program or look at our tutorials on our website to find out more.